Miami doesn't often make the news, and when they do make when it does make the news, it's often for horrible reasons. And this week, or this past couple weeks, it's because a condo tower collapsed in the middle of the night, leaving over 150 people trapped in the rubble.
The big story on Action News is the deadly condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. 3 people have died and dozens of others were carefully rescued. Security camera video from the adjacent building captured the moment of the collapse. The condo is coming down in 2 sections within seconds.
Once the dust settled, this photo taken by first responders puts the gravity of that situation into perspective. 55 units reduced to a pile of debris.
And the sight of a building just crumbling down like it was a house of cards left many, many people shocked. But after the shock subsided, I mean, the first thing people wanted to know was, how could this happen? How could a building just fall?
I want to start with perspective on how the building likely collapsed in general.
The soil conditions, foundation conditions might have been one of the reasons for such a failure.
When floors drop and pancake, as we saw in this disaster, civil engineers suspect trouble somewhere in the foundation.
The lower stories lose strength, let's say, and there's no enough capacity to withhold the structure. Then the upper stories, one by one, start pounding down.
And in reviewing all the video and pictures of the scene, experts say it looks as if the collapse started around the pool deck. That would line up with a call moments before the collapse in which a witness, now missing, said she saw a sinkhole where the pool used to be. Engineers say it all supports the theory that the concrete slab beneath the pool caved in first. That would have collapsed into the parking garage, which could have then caused the tower to buckle and crumble. While the investigation is a long way from finished, engineers say a failure around or beneath the pool deck does appear to have triggered the tragic chain of events. And that draws attention to this engineering report from October of 2018. It warned of a major error in the development of the original contract documents as it relates to the slab beneath the pool deck. The engineer said it was laid flat instead of sloped, which could not provide proper water drainage. And water that had piled up had been deteriorating the slab. The report specifically stated the failed waterproofing is causing major structural damage to the concrete structural slab below, and that failure to replace waterproofing in the near future will cause the extent of the concrete deterioration to expand exponentially. The report also found cracks in the parking garage columns, and that the previous garage concrete repairs were failing.
So how did we get here? I mean, it's likely that there will be multiple reasons that factored into the building's ultimate demise: shoddy construction, lax oversight, delayed repairs, but also just the fact that Miami is a city that is on the front lines of climate change. I remember what they said in that report about the pool deck and especially the garage. Well, here's what a former superintendent of the building said about what would happen to the garage when there was high tide.
And that's when I got a call today from William Espinoza. And William Espinoza was the building superintendent from 1995 through 2000, he said. And this is part of the conversation we had, because he said that as soon as he saw this building go down, he thought about all the water he used to have to deal with in the garage structure. Let's play some of that sound now.
Anytime that we had high tides, away from the ordinary, any king tide or anything like that, we would have a lot of salt water come in through the bottom of the foundation, and we had a huge pit in the garage that would handle 2 pumps in there to suck that water out. But it was so much water all the time that the pumps never could keep up with it. So we always had to be replacing pumps, and the water would just basically sit there, and then it would just seep downward. You know what I mean? It would just go away after a while, and I would think, where did this water go? Because it had to go in through somewhere. I'm talking about a foot, sometimes 2 feet of water in the bottom of the parking lot, the whole parking lot.
And that's the underground parking lot, right?
Correct. And I mean, like I said, the cars would float. That's how much water was in there. They would be floating around in the parking lot. And I go, that's just a lot of water coming in here, and we don't have a way of getting it out.
Now, this was back in the late 90s. In the subsequent 20 years, sea levels have risen even more, causing even more high tides and flooding in the Miami Beach area. And rising tides are an existential threat to all of Miami. That's because in Miami, there is no solution to the problem. You cannot build a levee like you can in other parts of the world because Miami is essentially built on a swamp that sits on top of limestone. So as the sea level rises, the water comes up from the ground.
And South Florida must contend with a vulnerability unique to an area with this population density.
Miami limestone is one of the most porous limestones anywhere, and water just pours through it very, very, very rapidly.
At an excavation pit on the campus of the university, Juanla showed us what the entire region is built on, a geologic sieve of limestone.
As sea level continues to rise, in the same way that rainwater disappears, the seawater will just come up.
Now, that's not stopping real estate developers in Miami because the money just keeps on flowing, baby. But don't take it from me. Take it from the mouths of the real estate developers themselves.
I do worry about the sea level rising a little bit, you know? I live on the ocean. I live right on the beach. I see the beach like doing its thing.
It's a concern. It needs to be addressed, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. But we're not seeing a lack of flow of capital to South Florida as a result of sea level rise as of yet.
You know, we have questions about sea level rise because the media talks about that a lot. But I can honestly say that no one has told me that they have not purchased here because of sea level rise.
Sea level rise is something that I'm actually dealing with right now personally. I happen to live in a residential neighborhood where they're trying to raise the streets.
Rising sea levels are a real issue confronting South Florida and other coastal cities. However, Americans have a short memory, and those memories don't go from generation to generation. So right now it's a younger generation that's focusing on rising sea level. If sea levels don't rise and wipe out Miami Beach, it'll be an afterthought.
We're building in terms of the worst possible tsunamis. We're safe for that. So, you know, we take all kinds of precautions in terms of floodgates, in terms of flood barriers.
People still want those views. They want to be in areas where they can see the water, and I think that will continue to drive sales.
We are one of, we do take sea level, climate change and so forth, and sea level rising, into consideration when we're developing. I have to say, the city of Miami has done a very good job taking a proactive approach and thinking about sea level rise and the impact, being on the ocean.
Regarding sea level rise, I just sold a house to an interesting young tech guy, and he had an opportunity to do some homework on the subject. And what he revealed to me was that he felt that there's a lot being done to counter the sea level rise and a lot of technology that's out there. But of course, we don't hear that in the media.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, you never heard about sea level rise. Today, you're starting to hear about it, but it's still distant and it's still in the future. I don't think it's affecting anybody today, but I think as we move on in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to need to address it, and I think we are starting to.
What is happening is a premium between waterfront properties and non-waterfront properties is narrowing, which is a good thing for urban infill of South Florida, especially Miami. I think there's a concern, and I think people are more reluctant to buy homes, single-family homes that are waterfront, and they're thinking twice about the condos on the waterfront.
When I first moved here in 1997, we always were dealing with flooded streets. Did it get a little bit worse? Yes, a little bit, but nothing I don't think for us to panic over. If we're going under, so is New York and the rest of the East Coast, in my opinion.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that's one of the most insane videos I've ever seen. I mean, it's like a tag yourself situation. Which one's your favorite? Whether it's the guy who's like, I talked to a tech guy who said there's like all kinds of solutions coming and the media doesn't want to talk about it, or the guy who's like, hey, if we're going under, so is New York. That's great. You love it. No, real estate speculation is what makes Miami tick. It has from its very inception. Most major cities are built because they sit on some strategic location, a major port or a river for the sake of some industry. Miami was built purely because it was a pretty good place to make money on real estate speculation. And to understand just how crazy it is that there is a major city on Miami Beach where the Champlain Tower was located, it's worth looking back at what Miami Beach used to look like before it was developed.
Sailing from Key West in 1870, Henry Lum and his son Charles saw coconut palms swaying on what is now Miami Beach. They bought land from the federal government for 25 cents an acre and built the beach's first home.
It was a barrier peninsula not even an island. Not until the early 1920s, when a cut was made at Baker's Hall over. It had tall mangroves on the bayside. The interior was concave, and it collected a lot of water. There were mangroves in the interior. It was a swamp. And the ocean side was a windswept beach. And it needed a lot of work to make it what it became.
It needed a lot of work to make it what it became, and the man who did the work to make Miami Beach what it became was a guy named Carl Fisher, who dreamt of a beachfront city for the rich and famous.
The Collins clan from New Jersey envisioned a southern Atlantic city. Fisher, on the other hand, saw the beach as a winter retreat for the rich and famous.
His vision early on was a place where these Gilded Age princes like himself could have big estates. And many of them were like him. They came out of a hard-scrabble background. And now they had money and they were throwing it around.
An army of engineers descended on the beach with heavy equipment to clear the land. Even a couple of elephants to help with the heavy lifting. Dredgers deepened channels and filled in the swamps.
Then he pumped in bay bottom in order to fill in that concave area and to eliminate the chance of water collecting again. And so now you're ready. You've got the stage.
So there you go, a city built by elephants on top of a drained swamp with sand poured in from the ocean floor to fill the concave pool of water in the middle. You don't have to be a structural engineer to understand that that isn't exactly the most stable place to build. But that hasn't stopped developers from turning that part of the world into a playground for the global glitterati, a trend that has only increased dramatically in recent years with the opening of these new mega clubs like Live, Story, and especially one called 11, which is a sort of giant nightclub / strip club. Check out that innovation. That is literally open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Reporting live, this is Young Joe from the greatest establishment. It's your boy Jake Paul, you already know we're at Club 11. My name is Anna Ross, we're at 11 right now in Miami. We're about to go crazy. We're back home for 11.
It really is a sight to behold. If you haven't been to 11, go there before Miami sinks. Now, this trend to make Miami a playground for the rich has been embraced by the city's mayor, Francis Suarez. He has self-consciously encouraged the move to make Miami a sort of East Coast version of Las Vegas meets Silicon Valley, but with an international flavor.
Come on down, Miami open for business.
Bubbling of activity and excitement and optimism.
Not just because of the taxes, but because of the culture of innovation.
When the venture capitalist Dilian Asperuhov suggested on Twitter last December that the tech industry should migrate from Silicon Valley to Miami, Mayor Francis Suarez responded, "How can I help?" He also set up a billboard in San Francisco. Thinking of moving to Miami? DM me. Suarez's bold, roll-out the red carpet approach to luring away Silicon Valley's tech elite has gotten so much attention in part because of how it contrasts with that of California's ultra-left political class. Take San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, who's best known for her failed effort to stop Uber and Lyft from using contract labor in California to benefit labor unions. Gonzalez tweeted, "Fuck Elon Musk," back in May of 2020. "Message received," replied Musk. In Miami, Mayor Suarez has embraced Musk's idea of building a $30 million tunnel for electric vehicles to ease congestion.
We have a unique opportunity to create a signature project, not just for Miami, but for the world.
Suarez's publicity stunts, including fashioning himself an avid Bitcoin enthusiast, have no doubt contributed to the city's momentum.
Love to have a mayor that is an avid Bitcoin enthusiast. Now, all of this has fueled an orgy of real estate development in Miami. This is from a Forbes headline in February. South Florida's real estate market is now officially in super boom mode. Quote, examples of South Florida's supercharged market are everywhere. More eye-turning than what buyers are willing to pay right now, however, are what the market reveals about buyers themselves and the factors driving them. Case in point, Hot One, Sotheby's agent Paola Marulanda recently closed the sale of The Beach House, a 6,000 square foot two-story property located in Miami Beach's South of 5th, their SoFi boutique condominium building Ocean House, with 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 2 sunrise terraces, 1 sunset terrace, a movie theater, and a glass-encased wine vault, enclosing a hidden home office. The Beach House closed for $15 million, over $15 million, as is all cash over original ask, with 2 backup cash deals in place. $1 Million listing star and agent Chad Carroll represented the undisclosed buyer. But as we saw with the collapse of the Champlain Tower, beneath the shiny veneer lies a rotten foundation. And as the Bitcoin bros and Latin American oligarchs fuel Miami's development craze, the brunt is being borne by the working poor. I want to go back to what one of those developers said.
What is happening is the premium between waterfront properties and non-waterfront properties is narrowing, which is a good thing for urban infill of South Florida, especially Miami.
What he describes as urban infill, check out that term, in Miami is really just rich people displacing poor people.
Hernandez owns her mobile home, but rents the land underneath it. The previous landlord kept rent increases low, but in 2018, a new owner, Miami Soar Management Corp., bought the property, and the rent suddenly shot up.
What were you paying for rent?
We paid $245 before. Every year, they put a $50 every year. And then they put a $200 suddenly.
That's a lot of money.
A lot of people came to pay that. Like me, I came to pay $700 because I am not working. I am retired.
From 2003 to 2018, Hernandez's rent rose from $245 to $500 per month. But then her new landlord raised the rent to $735 a month, a 47% per month increase in under 1 year.
Well, we got wind that last year the rents had significantly been increased. Some people had less than a week of notification.
Sajin Talui is an activist advocating for residents struggling to afford the rent increases at the Soar Mobile Home Park.
What was the new owner's reasoning for going from $500 to $700-800?
They had stated that they were using the money to make repairs to the homes, to bring it up to code, but there hasn't been much of anything done. There's so many hazards. You see the open pipes, broken cement. I mean, if you have kids, they can't even walk around and play here.
For decades, housing costs in areas like this have remained low. But as waters rise on the coastal homes of wealthy residents across South Florida, advocates say poor communities are being replaced by high-end properties.
What is the state of affairs for people who are living in mobile home parks now in Miami, in Greater Miami?
In the last 4 years alone, at least 7 mobile home parks have closed down in Miami-Dade County. There used to be 60 parks in 2015, now it's down to 53. And about 700 housing units have been lost.
The average Miami resident pays a higher percentage of their income on housing than in any other city in America. This is from an article in the Miami New Times. Quote, an analysis by Apartment List shows 62.7% of renters in Miami are cost burdened, the highest percentage of the nation's 100 largest metro areas. Nearly 34% of Miami renters spend half of their income or more on housing. Florida leads the nation in housing unaffordability, the study shows. The Sunshine State has the highest cost burden rate, with a 56.5% of renters spending 30% or more of their income on housing. In Miami, keeping a roof over your head can mean staying in your parents' home longer than desired or living with a revolving door of roommates. It also means competing for housing against millionaires and billionaires. But back to the Champlain Tower. The building was built in 1981. Now, the early 80s in Miami had a lot of similarities to the current moment. At the time, there was a massive construction boom driven in part by deregulation. This is from an editorial in the Miami Herald. Quote, "We are holding our elected officials accountable for a thorough, honest, and urgent investigation into the causes of this still unfolding tragedy to determine what caused it. But we do know a lot about the way the construction was done in South Florida in 1981 when this condo was erected. Condominium construction was red hot then, fueled in part by what would turn out to be a disastrous deregulation of the nation's savings and loans associations. We know that building codes for single-family homes during that era were weak and enforcement was lax, something that became terribly apparent when Hurricane Andrew roared through southern Miami-Dade County. We know that even though entire neighborhoods were flattened, the homes that stood up best to the Category 5 storm winds turned out to be the ones where developers spent more money to build stronger homes." And the other thing that was fueling the early 80s construction boom in Miami, cocaine, literally.
Drugs destroy a community when you're dealing with street level. When you're talking about drug dealing on a level where major drug dealers are living here, vacationing here, buying homes, laundering their money and so forth, that picks up the economy of a city or of a community.
And a lot of the money secretly did go into infrastructure.
$2.3 billion worth of construction is currently underway in downtown Miami.
The general construction and everything in downtown and on Brickell.
Downtown Development Authority officials say another $1 billion worth of construction will be in progress within the next 6 to 8 months.
It built half the city. It built the high-rises, it built the scrapes.
This building boom, they say, will last for the next 10 years.
The drug trade saved Miami in a lot of ways. If you look out at this skyline, a lot of this real estate was built or bought and paid for with drug money.
This new construction means at least 25,000 additional jobs and an annual payroll in the millions. The new condominiums, office buildings, and banks will add an additional $20 million to the city of Miami's tax base.
In the next few months, we'll see a lot of investigations into what exactly happened at Champlain Towers. There will be people who say it was one thing or another. There will be a furious debate as to how much climate change played a role, as if you could ever quantify that. Some people will blame the original builder. Others will blame the city of Surfside. Others will blame the condo owners themselves, who put off much needed repairs because they were so expensive. But at the core of all of this is capitalism. And the fact that housing, one of the essential necessities for human life, is subjected to market logic and treated as a vehicle to make money. In a system where housing is treated as a commodity, there will always be a housing crisis for the vast majority of people. As Marx's buddy Engels wrote, quote, "As long as the capitalist mode of production continues to exist, it is folly to hope for an isolated solution to the housing question or of any other social question affecting the fate of workers. It will simply never be as profitable to build housing for poor people as it is to build housing for rich people. A lot of the upfront costs are similar, but the potential profits for low-income housing are way, way lower than for high-end real estate. And in the pursuit of profit, developers are incentivized to lower building costs as much as possible, not to make sure that the building is still standing in the long run, at which point, as John Maynard Keynes said, we're all dead. In the short term, we need government reforms like the Green New Deal, which would not only attempt to stop the worst effects of climate change, but crucially invest public money in shoring up our nation's literally crumbling infrastructure and retrofitting buildings to make them more efficient and, yes, safe. And in the even shorter term, condo owners should start taking the maintenance of their building way more seriously. Just yesterday, another building in Miami Beach was evacuated.
Now to more breaking news, this time out of North Miami Beach. The immediate evacuation of a condominium has been ordered because of what was found in an inspection. CBS 4's Bobeth Yates is live on the scene in North Miami Beach with more. Bobeth.
Well, Lauren, after the collapse in Surfside, officials are not taking any chances. And here in North Miami Beach, that is exactly the case. Officials received this evaluation earlier today, and they made that tough decision to shut down this complex behind me.
40 years after the neoliberal reaction to the post-war consensus, the chickens are coming home to roost. Our country is literally falling apart. If we don't do something dramatic, at least at the scale of the New Deal in the 1930s, there will be many more tragedies like the Champlain Tower collapse. And just before we went live, we got breaking news that authorities have decided to just demolish the rest of the Champlain Towers because there's a hurricane coming to Miami, and they're worried that the rest of the building will collapse as well. probably spelling, the end of any search and rescue effort, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, this story is so tragic, but it's also an important story in highlighting everything you highlighted. I mean, it's such a comprehensive segment because not only do you touch on the environmental issues involved, but also like the financial incentives to build these not so stable buildings, right? You even get into the drug money being laundered into these buildings, which I feel like most news stories on this have completely missed, and it's important to touch on that. But I do want to just quickly address like the end part of your segment where you talk about who's to blame and how the HOA, the homeowners association, it's likely that they're going to get some blame. That's actually the area where I've had a little bit of frustration because the building was built in a terrible way. It had this massive design flaw with the pool deck being built on a flat concrete slab. The condo owners had no idea about that, right? They have no idea. It's probably not disclosed anywhere that there's this huge design flaw. And so all of a sudden you get hit with a $15 million repair. And we don't know what the economic situation is for like most of those condo owners. So yeah, they pushed back. But the heart of the issue was how the building was built in the first place, why it was built the way that it was built. And yeah, the issue of deregulation. I mean, we're seeing the chickens come home to roost in several states right now as a result of deregulation. I mean, you have Texas with their deregulated and privatized energy grid and how it just completely failed the people of Texas during a winter storm. You have that Colonial Pipeline that, provides gas to 45% of people in the East Coast, and they don't invest in the necessary cybersecurity to ensure that they don't get hacked. I mean, you see it happening over and over again. But the one other thing I wanted to bring up is already we're seeing some states implement policies that are making people panic. Because if you're in Hawaii and you own oceanfront property, it's very likely that flooding has become an issue. Some of these beaches, by the way, have been destroyed because the homeowners have been like putting up these massive sandbags to kind of stop the water from getting to their properties. And so ProPublica just yesterday reported that legislators are going to now require that sellers disclose the risks to the buyers because they hadn't had to do that before. And clearly, if you're going to disclose that, the likelihood of you being able to sell that house, I mean, it's going to be far more difficult. Assuming, who knows, maybe people would be dumb enough to buy those homes anyway. But yeah, I mean, this is going to have an impact on so many different people, not just those living in the waterfront properties, but yeah, as you mentioned, the people living inland who are now going to be displaced as a result of these rich people flowing into their communities and pushing them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just throughout human history, people don't live right on the water for very good reasons. I mean, it's just, this is like a new phenomenon, like a very, very new phenomenon to build kind of major development, like right on the edge of, on the water's edge. It's not a very safe place to be in general. And with regard to the homeowners association, I mean, I think that you're right. I mean, it's like that's where this market logic comes into place, where if the responsibility is on for the building safety is on the homeowners themselves, their incentives are completely warped. It costs a lot of money to do this. So like, they're just going to like push it off, especially if they're not like engineers and they're not like, they don't know
exactly
how to. This is why this is a collective problem. The safety of the buildings that exist in the world, even if they're residential buildings, people coming in and out, workers are coming in and out, guests are coming in and out. Like, it is our problem. It is not their problem. It is our problem.
Totally.
So the collective solutions to all these things should have to be in place. Like like if a building needs to be repaired, like it should be just funded by the government through taxes. Everyone should pay for it at all times. I mean, like, it's the kind of thing that in any individual case, like, yeah, it's like, oh, it sucks. Like, we're subsidizing, the repairs for these rich people. But like, this is what ends up happening is like, they're just not incentivized to do it. You have to force their hand. through collective action, because like that's what I think is at the core of a lot of this, is that the role of the government in housing has to be incredibly more active in the United States. Like, we cannot just leave it up to private individuals and private developers. Like, if that is a recipe for disaster, housing is just way too important. It's the fundamental thing, it's the thing. I don't know, like,
right,
outside of food and water, like, it's the next thing. So we just, in this country, we just don't see it as that kind of issue. We see it as a totally private issue, and it's not. It's a public issue.
Yep. I totally agree. I absolutely. And as someone who lives in a condo building, first of all, I'm kind of panicking. I'm not going to lie, because I mean, this is an older building than the one that just collapsed in Miami. We also have a pool deck. So now I'm just like, is the pool deck on a flat surface or slope surface? Right. And you're right. Like, the HOA, I mean, I love my neighbors, no hate, but well, some of them a little bit of hate, but most of them, they're great people. Right. But they're not experts on this kind of stuff. Right. And so typically in HOAs, you are going to deal with a little bit of incompetence, and you need everyone to vote on whether or not you're going to take out a loan, otherwise known as a special assessment, to make the repairs that need to be done. There's a lot of pushback every time that conversation comes up. So I totally agree with you. As someone who owns a unit in a building, there's just an inherent conflict of interest when it comes to these matters, because it's going to hurt your own finances to pay for the repairs that need to be done. So, which, I mean, I'm always in favor of paying for the repairs. It hurts. I get it. But
after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, which like destroyed Miami, people don't really remember it anymore outside of Miami, but it was like it destroyed the whole city, or this part of the city. They passed certain laws that made it mandatory to have like certain kinds of windows in any new building. They made it. They made you have like flood insurance and hurricane insurance. Like, that's like a mandatory thing. And it's this, what I'm talking about. It's like, it's because if you put it on individuals, like, it's too, the costs are so great that they're incentivized to just not do it, Whereas if you socialize the problem, if you socialize the cost, and everyone chips in a little bit to it, then you can have a much more coherent solution to the problem. Like, you have to expand that to include, like, building collapse insurance, like that
at
they
this
should
point,
just, like, go to like they should make it mandatory for like everyone to chip in to look at every single building in the state or the city or whatever, and see if it's going to freaking collapse at any moment, and if it is, like, those repairs should be socialized, because if they're privatized, they're just not going to do it.
yeah, I agree. In Hollywood, they built a bunch of high-rise towers. I think they're like hotels and condominium buildings on a fault line. It's just like, I mean, but they don't care. I mean, it's going to collapse. If there's a big earthquake in LA, which is likely to happen sometime in the future, those buildings are definitely vulnerable, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you got Eric Garcetti, he's buddies with developers. Very similar stuff is happening in big cities like Los Angeles, and it's really disheartening to see it.